So we have a screen on here that says accessibility metadata, what it is and how to use it. If you should be seeing that and you're not, please send me a comment and I'll see if I can fix it. No promises. So this is a pretty descriptive title. I am going to be taking you through a basic definition of accessibility data. I'm going to show you the two places that you can communicate accessibility data, and I'm going to show you how to create hopefully meaningful accessibility data. A little bit of housekeeping before I get too far. I hope to have a fairly long question period at the end today, so as I speak, do feel free to drop questions in the chat and I'll make sure I'll look at them at the end, or you can save them for the question period, whichever is easiest for you. I am going to be mentioning several links throughout. They're all going to be on the final slide, but I'm also going to paste them in the chat at the end, so you can just copy paste from there.
Yeah, you want to go outside with
Sean? Sorry. It's okay, Tan. Sounds very cute over there. I will also have my email address posted at the end. Do feel free to email me with any extra questions you have. If it's something you want to ask outside of the group, or if you just, you forgot it and you remember at the end, shoot me an email, right? I'll answer as best I can. All right, onwards. There we go. So first off, what is accessibility metadata? This is going to be a little basic, but I do want to go over this before I get too far, just so that we're all on the same page. First, we're going to define metadata. Metadata is fundamentally data about other data, right? So data that describes data. Because I do what I do, and because we all do what we do, I basically only talk about bibliographic metadata. In other words, data about books. And in our case, data about a specific format of a publication. Accessibility metadata, then, is metadata that describes the accessibility of that publication. So if accessibility metadata describes the accessible features of a given book, what exactly is it saying? What does that mean? It could mean lots of things. So I'm going to give you some examples of accessibility features. Reflowability, can the text be resized or is it in fixed format? Print equivalent page numbering. Are there numbers in the code that indicate or that match the print version so that people who are in classes or book clubs can talk about a book together? Language tagging. Are foreign language words marked up so that screen reader technology can pronounce them correctly? Of course, there are so many more than this, and I know you can think of a couple off the top of your head, and there's metadata to describe all of it. We're going to talk more about what that is in a second. I want to point out, though, as just a brief aside, I don't know what you've spoken about in the first two webinars in this series, but some of you might be thinking, like, Amanda, these are just features of ebooks. These are things that ebooks do. These are features that all EPUBs should have. And yes, you're right. They are features that all EPUBs should have. And they are features that make books accessible to everyone. Even people who wouldn't say that they have a print disability probably use the resizability and reflowability in their e-readers. I know I do. But there are also people who do need these features, who can't read a book without them. Both types of reader deserve to be told if your book has these accessibility features. So that's what we're going to talk about today, not necessarily how to get the features into your book. That is not my area of expertise, but rather how to tell people that the features are in the book. Okay, onward. What about audiobooks, you're asking me? So I just want to note that audiobook accessibility specifications are being worked on. The work is ongoing. There are lots of ways to make an audiobook more accessible that I can't really speak to. And there are some, but not as many as there are for EPUBs, ways to communicate that in the metadata. So because that spec is still evolving, this presentation is really going to focus on EPUB and other text-based formats, mostly EPUB. If you have audio questions, feel free to ask them at the end. I can't promise that I can answer them, but I will try. All right. So what is accessibility metadata? I have told you what it does, and I have told you why you should have it, but I haven't actually told you what it is, what it looks like, and where it goes. So I will dig into that now. When we talk about accessibility metadata, we're actually talking about two different types of metadata. The first is that schema.org metadata. For the purposes of this presentation, it's only for EPUBs, and that data is contained within the EPUB. You've probably only seen the schema.org data if you make your EPUBs by hand or you just like to poke around with stuff. Okay, the other one you're all going to be more familiar with, presumably. That's your ONIX metadata. That, of course, all formats, all book formats have ONIX metadata, and it's standard across the industry for the most part. You or your distributor or LitDistco send ONIX to your trading partners so that they'll know how to sell your book. You are either creating the ONIX yourself, or you're sending your data as a spreadsheet, which then gets converted to ONIX. So, in case you're not sure, you do have ONIX. You might not know it, but you have it. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into both of these now. So here is a sample of some schema. I know everybody loves to look at long hunks of code on a slideshow, so everybody please enjoy this. I find this code that you're looking at here to be pretty human readable, right? You've got the meta property schema access mode textual, right? It's saying that the access mode is textual. You might not know exactly what that means, but you can read it. Especially that accessibility summary on the bottom, which is explicitly meant to be human readable. I won't read it aloud to you. It doesn't really matter what it says for this purpose, just that it's in human readable text. This metadata that looks like this is stored in your EPUB package. If you don't make EPUBs, it's likely that you've literally never seen this before. We're going to talk later about a much easier way to get this information when we talk workflow. But the way to get it in this format that looks like this, if you're not actually making your EPUB, is first, okay, make a copy of your EPUB. Rename that copy from EPUB to zip. Your computer is going to tell you not to do that. It's not the boss of you. Ignore it. Extract that folder. Open the extracted folder. Open the file that's called OEBP, or the folder that is called OEBPS. Then use a text editor to open the file with the extension OPF, and you'll find this in here. I know that's a ton of steps, but I just wanted you to see that, like, yes, you do have this. It's inside your EPUB. There's a lot more schema metadata than just the accessibility stuff. You'll have to like Control F for access or whatever, but it is presumably in there. That's how you get it. There's an easier way, a more user-friendly way, but it does exist within the EPUB that you have on your hard drive floating around somewhere. All right, voila. Here is that same accessibility metadata expressed in ONIX. So this block of code probably looks a little more familiar to you, I hope. It looks like ONIX, right? This is saying, with a couple of changes, which we'll discuss later, almost the same thing as that stuff was saying. So this information is the same. For core source users, which I think some of you are, here's that same information again in core source. So this is a screenshot of the product form features section of core source that is listing out, again, all of that exact same metadata. So you would enter it in core source, it would go into ONIX, and your core source entry is coming from the information that you're learning from schema. Okay. So we have now seen the two types of accessibility metadata, right? The schema.org metadata, which is inside your EPUBs, and the ONIX metadata that you are sending out to your trading partners. We're going to talk about how to create it, and crucially, how to know what accessibility features your ebook has. Creating accessibility metadata. The schema.org metadata is created by the person who created your ebook, usually. And usually you aren't going to know what that metadata is until the book is finished, right? You won't have it until you have the book in hand, unless your ebook producer is like remarkably communicative. ONIX metadata is typically created by the person who creates your ebook metadata. Typically, unfortunately, they're not actually doing accessibility metadata at all. And that's not a knock on them or on you. It's just that most publishers haven't figured out how to get this into their workflow yet. Some of the publishers who are making it are adding it to a template pre-publication. This isn't like necessarily a bad thing. If you only publish fiction that doesn't have a complicated hierarchy of headings and there's no illustrations and you use the same template every single time, like your ebooks are almost identical, maybe you can consistently attach the same accessibility metadata. But if you deviate from that at all, just by entering the same copy paste accessibility metadata every single book, you may end up sending inaccurate data, which in this case is actually pretty bad. In all cases, it's pretty bad, but in this case, it's pretty bad. So that's the thing we want to avoid. And that's what we're going to talk about now, which is accessibility metadata workflows that will ideally lead to you sending out accurate and representative accessibility metadata. So I am going to walk you through 3 potential workflows that you can incorporate into your ebook production and metadata processes to ensure that you can get your metadata into your systems in a correct and accurate way. Each workflow will discuss how to get or create your schema metadata. Then for all 3 workflows, we are going to talk about how to turn that into ONIX. So you're going to go from schema, which is in your EPUB, to ONIX, which you are sending out. There are potentially some issues with that, and I want to highlight them now. I am, for the rest of this presentation, operating under the assumption that the person who made your ebook is assigning the schema metadata correctly, that they know what they made. If you are working with a conversion partner who is certified accessible, and for this project, I understand that you will be, then you're golden. If you're not, you might have to do a little bit of chatting just to make sure that the person that you're working with actually knows what they're doing. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but for now, moving forward with the assumption that your schema metadata is correct. All right. The first workflow is going to be useful for those of you who have your ebooks converted by that certified accessible conversion house, such as those of you who are working with this LPG bound combo project today. The second workflow will be for those of you who are getting your ebooks created by an external partner who isn't certified accessible. And then the third workflow is for you lucky few who have an in-house digital production person. So workflow 1, getting your schema if you are certified, if you are working with a certified accessible conversion house. You guys are in luck. These people are already doing the work of that schema metadata for you. They will have sent along an ebook accessibility report, which is usually going to be an export from ACE by Daisy, which is a piece of software that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Just put a pin in that. The report is probably going to be named something like ISBN_ACE report.htm. You can open it with any browser or text editor, but I recommend the browser, and it'll go through the accessibility features that the conversion house has said, yeah, this is correct. This is what we're saying about this book. And that's it. You found it. You have your schema metadata. Good work. If this is you, you can now choose perhaps to take a moment to see if you can find one of those files and open it up just to have a look at it if you're feeling like it. Those files are going to include a list of all the schema data assigned by the ebook creator, along with information about the accessibility standards that they are meeting. So, if you feel like taking the time to poke around your hard drive, maybe go check that out. Group 2 are those of you who are working with external partners who are not certified. So this is how to get the schema data if you're working with an external partner and they're not sending you that report. So for those of you getting your ebooks created or converted by someone who is not certified accessible, you do have one extra step. You can get your accessibility schema data the hard way, which is the way I showed you, where you have to go through and like unzip the file and then open the folder and blah, blah, blah. Or you're going to go download a piece of software called ACE by Daisy. It's free. You love it. It's really fun. I mean, it's really fun if you're me. I think it's really fun. It's easy to use, and it serves 2 purposes. It checks your EPUBs to see if there are any accessibility issues, very important, and it tells you what the accessibility metadata is saying, right? So for the purposes of this presentation, that's the critical piece. It says, here is what the creator of this ebook has said about the accessibility features in this book. Go download ACE. Once you have ACE, you're going to run your EPUB through ACE. That's step 2. And then in step 3, you're going to go check that metadata tab. I'll show you what that looks like with some screenshots. I have learned my lesson the hard way about doing live demos and webinars, so we are not going to do that today. It's all screenshots all the time. All right, when you run an EPUB through ACE, it's going to give you this nice summary of accessibility issues. You'll see in this one here that there are no critical, serious, moderate, minor, violations, which is to say it's meeting the standards as far as the ACE software can tell. That's great. We love it. This book looks great. Then you can go click on that metadata tab. So I've got that highlighted metadata. And then the other highlighted piece is accessibility. You can filter by accessibility. And that will show you all of the schema metadata, schema accessibility metadata assigned by the ebook creator. But what if there isn't any, right? What if this came up and there was no accessibility metadata in the schema file? Or maybe there are violations and you're like, ooh, not great. Or other problems in general as reported by ACE. If that is the case and you are working with an external conversion partner, you've actually got another step. You've got a step 3.5, which is that you'll want to go back to the person who created your ebook and talk to them. So that step 3.5 is talk to the ebook creator. Depending on your agreement with them and how they plan to work, you might be able to just ask them to add accessibility metadata or fix errors as presented by ACE and send the file back to you. Or you might have learned that this ebook creator is just like fundamentally making inaccessible books. And depending on your relationship with them, that's going to inform your choices going forward. From a metadata perspective, that's going to mean one of two things. We're going to discuss when we talk about what to do with the schema.org metadata, what you should do if you actually don't have any accessibility data in a little bit. But for now, just remember, if you don't have it, talk to your conversion partner, see if you can get it. If not, we'll have some small solutions for you. All right. So the third group are the people who have in-house digital production departments. You lucky few. If you have somebody in-house making your ebooks, or if you have a person in-house who wears the e-production hat every month or so, your job is going to be either way, way easier than the other two, or it's going to be a little bit harder. So your first step is talk to that person who is making your ebooks. Are they aware of ebook accessibility? Are they already making accessible ebooks and assigning all this great metadata and you just didn't know about it? If so, well, that's just great, right? Hooray. They can just give you what they have put in the schema.org. They can describe the metadata features to you, and you can work together to assign it to your ONIX, and then you're beautiful. However, it is possible that they're going to go, oh, what? Accessibility metadata, what are you talking about? And if that's the case, great, it's time for some training. There are a lot of places to learn about accessible ebook production. The Accessible Publishing Learning Network, which is apln.ca, is a great place to start. There are a lot of courses online that you can take, and there are experts that I'm sure you can talk to who will help you learn to create accessible ebooks. So that's your step 3 if your in-house person is not assigning accessibility data in schema. Like in workflow 2, if you don't have that schema data, accessibility data at this point, there are things you can do. But at this stage, everybody who has gone through these workflow steps should have something that looks like this, which is that report out of ACE by Daisy that shows you all the accessibility features, or like this, which is that screenshot of the schema code with all of the accessibility lined up. If you don't have those, we are going to talk about what to do, but I do want to put a pin in that just one more time, which is that if you are not getting schema.org accessibility metadata, your books are missing key accessibility features, right? Even if they have those features, if you're not telling them about it, well, we'll get there. But go talk to your conversion partners, talk to the person who is making your EPUBs, make sure you're getting this information. All right, so you have these, you've got your schema.org accessibility metadata. What do you do with it? How do you get that ONIX, or how do you get that schema and make it into ONIX? So now that you all have this in hand, we're going to talk about that. Right now, any vendor that looks inside your ebook for metadata is going to know your accessibility features, right? So there are vendors out there, I think DeMarc is one of them, who will scrape the inners of your ebook and say, here are the accessibility features, we've pulled it out, it's here. Anyone who displays from ONIX, so for example, All Lit Up's ebooks for everybody is taking just your ONIX data, they don't have anything to go by. They can't get at your schema. They have no idea what features you have. Let's give them the data that they need to help describe the accessibility features of your book. I'll walk you through the steps. We're going to do a worked example of a single piece of data. All right. First, you're going to go to the accessibility properties crosswalk, which was helpfully created by experts from Benetech, EDR Labs, and others. It'll tell you what to assign in your ONIX based on what's inside that schema metadata. Another thing to put a pin in, it is not a direct one-to-one. It's not like if this, then this, period, end of. There is a little bit of thinking that you have to do about it, but we love thinking. We're all very smart people, right? Right. Okay. So you have the accessibility properties crosswalk open. Right now you don't because I haven't given you the link. You will have it. I will have the link for you at the end of the show. And then also I'm going to show you some screenshots in a second. The next step is to look at that crosswalk and decide what ONIX codes you should be using based on the crosswalk. So my schema metadata says blah, I will assign the codes as described in this way. And then you'll put them in your database or your spreadsheet or however you get your ONIX data out into the world. For those of you, so first, I'm gonna walk you through one that we're gonna do together. Here is what the crosswalk looks like. You see a definition of the feature, and then you see how to express it in schema, ONIX, and MARC. So for example, if your schema.org says that there's alternative text in this ebook, you would assign code 14 from list 196 within your ONIX database for short alternative descriptions. If you were a librarian, you would do this other stuff in MARC, but we are not going to talk about that because we only have 1 hour, not 18. So in our case, I'm going to do a tricky one here. We have schema, access mode, textual, and visual. So this is a screenshot from that ACE by Daisy report again. The metadata tab is open and we are looking at schema, access mode, textual, and then the other value is visual, which is to say you have both of those things in this book, okay? We should find the section of the crosswalk on access mode. So here's the crosswalk again. I have Control F for access mode. It's right here. It's the same thing, easy. And then within the list for access mode, we should find textual. Uh-oh, here's a great big screenshot. Oh my, there's so much text here that I couldn't put it all on the screen. Okay, that's fine. This is a very long and complicated one. So this is what I was saying about it not being one-to-one. But at the very top, which you can't even see here, it says list 81, code 10, combined with list 196, code 10, means that all text is actual text. So if you're working within ONIX and you assign code 10 from list 81 and code 10 from list 196, you are saying access mode textual, which is to say all of the text in this EPUB is actual text as opposed to an image of text, which means a screen reader can read it. So in this crosswalk, there are a lot of notes and interesting facts, but fundamentally, if your schema is accurate and you follow that crosswalk, your ONIX is going to be accurate too. That was one piece of schema data to ONIX data. So as you saw, it was the access mode textual, and then it needed 2 ONIX codes to represent it. If we have time at the end, and if you'd like, I can go through more data pieces in the crosswalk, but honestly, it's fairly straightforward. That's probably the most complicated one that you'll encounter as you work through if you have fairly standard non-complex ebooks. But yeah, as I think we'll have a fair bit of time for questions. If you want me to go through more examples, let me know. And as I said, always email me about this. And I know that there are many, many people who would happily answer your questions, both in this group and on the APLN forums about that document. So lots of ways to get help on that one. All right, so now you know I need to assign code 10 from list 81 and I need to assign code 10 from list 196. What do you do about that? Oh, hang on, I've clicked away. There we go. Maybe all of this code stuff is actually not that useful to you. Your metadata database will have places to add these codes, but if, as I said, that's not that useful to you, there are places to go for help. If you are an eBound member, eBound can absolutely tell you where to put those codes. If you're not an eBound member and you use a different database, your database provider should be able to say, oh, these codes go in blah places. And if neither of those places can help you, feel free to shoot me an email. I can give you a hand. I'll tell you where to put them. It's always fairly straightforward in these databases if you know where to look. So here's an example of the accessibility data in CoreSource. These codes that we are looking at here under the product form features value heading, those are all codes from that list 196 mentioned. Your database likely looks, it might not look similar to this, but it has similar things. You are looking for product form features and you want to select from 09, which is accessibility detail. If you're not sure where you should go, again, ask us. You can also ask during the question period, and I will see if I can impress everyone by telling you where to go from memory. No promises. So you can see here on this screenshot that one of the 09 EPUB accessibility details is 10. No reading system accessibility options disabled. Extremely astute webinar paid listeners will notice that we actually talked about this in our quick worked example. This is code 10 from code list 196. The other code from that example was 10 from list 81. 10 from list 81 means product content type text. In other words, the combination of those two codes are saying the text in this book is actually text, not images. And if your reading device has a read aloud function, it will be able to read that text. So this is my example of the crosswalk not being a one-to-one. But our very smart and very expert creators of that crosswalk have worked really hard to ensure that each thing means the same thing. So even though there's 2 codes, not 1, still means the same thing. Crosswalk works, use it. Okay, what if I don't have schema accessibility metadata? If you're one of those publishers who has an external partner creating ebooks without accessibility metadata, or your in-house team isn't creating schema data, you have three options here. I mean, all right. The first thing, number one, overarching option is that you should figure out why you don't have accessibility data in your schema, and you should rectify that problem. So, going forward, make sure that we can fix that. However, assuming you're working with backlist titles or you've got like a front list that came out this year, but you're going to fix this going forward, you have three options. Option one is just to add to your ONIX metadata unknown accessibility, which is code 08 from code list 192 in those product form feature sections. That says exactly what it says. We don't know anything about whether or not this is accessible. You are essentially telling readers, read at your own risk. But that's still useful information, right? If you don't know for sure that you've made an accessible book, to say to people, hey, we're not sure, that's useful. However, if you do know some things about the accessibility, say because ACE confirmed that you had alt text and good nav structure, and you know that you've made it reflowable, you can look at that ONIX code list 192 and say that, right? You can find the codes that would apply and use them. Do that carefully, right? Make sure that you are assigning accurate codes. Test your ebook, run it through ACE. If you're going to assign codes without a certified accessible partner telling you what to assign, do it with care. Make sure we're being accurate. All right. Your third option, if you are not confident doing that, but you still know that you're not doing anything explicit to make it inaccessible, right? You don't have a bunch of like JPEGs of text and you're not explicitly and inherently turning off features of e-reading devices. You can use that code 10, which is no reading system accessibility options actively disabled. At the very least, at that point, you're saying, hey, you know what? If your device is going to do a read aloud, this book can be read aloud. Again, you want to make sure that's true, right? You do want to make sure that your navigation structure and your heading structure is intact, and you want to make sure that you do not have a bunch of JPEGs full of text, but at the least you can say something. Once again, this is a solvable problem. Decide why you don't have accessibility schema data. Do you need to switch conversion houses? Do you need to send your in-house person to do some upskilling? This is important stuff and we want to get it right, and it is only getting more and more important. All right, we're going to briefly dive into conformance and certification. Now that your ebook has schema data and your ONIX is accurate, yay, you're doing great. We're so proud of you. This is the best. If your ebook provider is creating accessible ebooks and making schema.org metadata, you're probably already conforming to the metadata portions of EPUB Accessibility 1.1 specification. However, here are the rules as laid out in EPUB Accessibility 1.1 for your schema data. It's all EPUB publications must include schema.org accessibility metadata in the package document that exposes their accessible properties, regardless of whether the publication also meets accessibility or optimization requirements. That part's important. In order to meet the spec, even if your ebook doesn't meet the rest of the guidelines, you've got to say that it doesn't. If you're making a fixed layout ebook, for example, so it's not reflowable, or, and this is possible, you're actually not at the point where you're making fully accessible ebooks. You're going to get there, but for now, at least, you can tell people, not fully accessible yet, sorry, right? Use the metadata for that. For ONIX, EPUB Accessibility 1.1 says, publishers must include accessibility metadata in the record format required for distribution of an EPUB publication such as ONIX or MARC. Don't worry about MARC, we're not going to talk about that here. Do worry about your ONIX. The spec doesn't say what your ONIX has to say, but it says it has to have some accessibility data in your ONIX. So if you've already got the schema data, make it match. All right, a quick note on that GCA Benetech certification. If you're a certified publisher or if you're looking to be a certified publisher, which would be great, right? It's a great thing to do. You're going to find yourself looking at reports produced by the certifiers. They tell you about your schema data, not your ONIX. For your schema data, they are looking for schema accessibility feature, schema accessibility hazard, which should be none, and schema access mode. These are the three must-haves according to the spec. Schema access mode sufficient and schema accessibility summary are should haves. Once you have these, you should convert them to ONIX and add them to your metadata, and then you'll be meeting at least the metadata portion of EPUB Accessibility 1.1. Whew. So you've got your ebook creators on board with creating your schema accessibility data. You've got your ONIX metadata set up to match. Where does the data go, you might be asking? Everywhere. Now, that's a little bit facetious, but it is true. Everywhere you send your ONIX data gets your ONIX accessibility metadata. Everywhere you send your EPUB can access your schema accessibility data. They might not be displaying it yet, but that is going to change. And I expect it's going to change soon. Retailers and libraries are going to start building accessibility metadata into their displays. We don't know yet where they'll get it. They might get it from schema, they might get it from ONIX, they might get it from MARC, they might invent it themselves, they might use a combo of all four systems. But if you aren't sending data, they won't have anything to say about it, right? They really can't just invent it whole cloth. They do have to get it somewhere. And publishers who aren't sending that data are going to end up sooner or later with a little flag that says something like unknown accessibility, or worse, publisher has not supplied accessibility information. Don't be that publisher, right? Send that accessibility metadata. All right. So like I said, I was going to leave us a lot of time for questions. We do actually still have half an hour, so even more time than I anticipated. But no one's ever hated a short webinar, right? So thank you for your time. As I said, you can email me at any time. Don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Frequently, I can answer questions super quick. I have got the schema to ONIX crosswalk linked here, Ace by Daisy, some easy to access ONIX code lists, and a place to learn more about ebook accessibility. And I will paste all of those links in the chat. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions as I figure out how to access the chat here. All right. Okay. I don't see any hands.
I see a hand. Rebecca, go ahead.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. Excuse me. I had a question actually about the accessibility summary in the schema metadata. I know like we get our books converted by a accessible converter, so they do give us that data. But sometimes when I see that summary, I don't know if it's meeting what it should, if it's giving the information maybe in the best way for like the human readable summary. So I was just wondering if you had any maybe tips of what should be included there, like what it should say, if there's anything, just anything in that regard.
So you're not concerned that it's inaccurate. You're just not convinced it's like helpful.
Yeah, or and accurate. I'm just wondering maybe how to assess it.
Interesting. You know what? I'm not actually sure, because if when you get your EPUBs, do you run them through Ace by Daisy?
Yeah, so I'm actually, we don't create ours here, but I do all of the checking of them and of all our ebooks to make sure all of our all the features are in there. And we were just recently GCA certified, so we're still new to that. So I just wanted to make sure I was kind of following the best practices when it comes to, I guess, checking that data that comes back.
Yeah. So if you are running it through Ace by Daisy and it's looking okay, and if you're certified and the GCA partners didn't say, oh, this is wrong, you are probably doing okay. It's a little bit of a tough question, because on a book by book basis, it's kind of hard to say, oh, is this accurate every time? If Ace by Daisy isn't flagging anything wrong and you're certified and the conversion house is certified, you're probably fine.
Okay.
There is space to reword the summary based on what you've learned. So there is space where you can read that human readable summary and say, okay, so it has said, the summary says that there are short alternative descriptions, but that's actually not showing up in the other metadata. Oh, and there's no illustrations in this book at all, actually. What are these alt descriptions about? Like at that point, you can sort of think through, hang on, they've just copied a template here.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I was concerned about, maybe the template.
Yeah, the obvious template nature of some of these things.
Yeah, because our books are a little bit some complex with some of the things, and I know when I was working with Benetech, they had suggested maybe putting in some notes in that summary just based on some things that
Interesting.
weren't necessarily accessible in the ebook, but they're as good as they get in the print book as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I was just wondering if you had any advice about, I guess, making sure that summary was as good as it could be.
Yeah, that's a really, I don't have any advice about that. I wish I did. That's a great question, actually. I'm going to make a note of that. And I'm going to see if I'm going to talk around and see if I hear anything, and I'll let you know if I learn anything. But I think at
Thank
this point,
you.
if the GCA folks are saying like, hey, what you are getting back is not necessarily representing, then yeah, you are going to have to do a little bit more thinking about it. And if I learn anything about how to do that thinking, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hadn't realized that Daisy would flag that, so that is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Well, I hope the lack of questions is because you all feel super confident going back to your ebooks now and finding your schema data and adding that ONIX metadata. If that is not the case and you are all stunned into silence by confusion and you just don't know how to phrase your questions, I reiterate that you can please email me or go to the APLN forums and ask the questions there. And I think we'll give folks another minute or two just in case a lightning bolt strikes. But then other than that side, I guess we'll call it a day. Tom. Uh-oh.
This is just a very minor thing that I thought I could just bring up briefly. When you're using, okay, list 196, code 10, there are no problems. If you read the ONIX note, which runs on for a good paragraph, it does make the caveat that there's an except clause. So it's code 10 means there are nothing's turned off unless it's listed as an EPUB usage constraint. So this is more a warning for end users of the metadata, that you should at least be aware that 10 can't just be left on its own. Somebody can also list a constraint that may affect accessibility, and it would be legitimate. So you could theoretically say, nothing's turned off, I turned something off. It would be a warning to any end users to at least consider that possibility, and a strong recommendation to anyone here as a user: don't be running around trying to use clauses like that, because it just confuses things.
Yeah, so to clarify, that's where you see that except in brackets that I so blatantly skated past and didn't mention even once. So if you are displaying the data, and that's a really good point, Tom, you should make sure to also display the excepts instead of just saying, oh, this is perfectly accessible, so I'm going to put a green check mark on it and call it a day. Tom, I think I've summarized your thought there.
Yeah, that's it. It's I don't recommend it as a thing to do. I simply am observing it's a thing that can be done.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the observation.
Are there any other questions? If not, I would just like to thank Amanda for her wonderful presentation. And for everyone who attended this webinar, you will receive a follow-up email with the link of the recording. And if you missed the previous 2 sessions, you can also find those on eBound Canada's YouTube channel. Yeah, thank you, everyone.